This is Rose Sally Holmes, and it is a climbing rose. I live in Northern California in an inland valley. We get down in the 20s Fahrenheit during the winter, and the reason I'm telling you that is that this rose is virtually evergreen for me. It does lose some of its leaves, but predominantly it's evergreen. And this is on the front of my house, and it's quite a show. As you can see here, it's mid-May right now. And the bloom cycle starts just depending on the seasons and how the year's developing, but generally it does its first big bloom in May. And one of the nice things about this particular rose is the profusion, as you can see here, and also you're going to notice some variety in the color. When it's cooler, you see the apricot buds on this, and then when it's cooler, you get this nice blush pink and little tones of apricot in there. And then as it gets hotter, these will tend to fade to more of a white blossom. And the heads on these, as you can see, that group of flowers right there is probably almost the size of a human's head. It's quite large, and it's made up of what we call single flowers, so 5-petal flowers, but a lot of them, much like a polyantha rose would be. And because of the profusion of color, of bloom, it's a great flower for cutting. We bring these in the house all the time. There's so many on the plant that it doesn't really look like you've cut them. And oh, by the way, the foliage, I'm showing the foliage there because it's such a good looking foliage plant. I've grown over 100 types of roses over the years, and I have to say that foliage wise, Sally Holmes is the best carefree foliage I've ever dealt with. I don't get any aphids. I don't get any black spot rust or any mildew, any of those issues on my roses. I've seen a little bit of mildew on somebody else's once, but I've grown this in a few different properties over a long period and used it hundreds of times in designs, and it's just, I would say, the most carefree rose there is. This would be on my top 5 list of all the plants that I use in design because of its big display as well as just a carefree kind of plant. Now that said, there is maintenance. You do want to deadhead this plant, and those flowers do need to come off and need to be deadheaded. So there is the work there, and there's another video that shows how to prune this plant. But it rotates. I get 4 to 6 blossom cycles per year out of this, and I've had roses off of these in December, where we're located. So this is a real workhorse in the garden in terms of a show, and as climbers go, I don't think there's anything that can really touch it in terms of its health, its look, and the amount of color that it provides. Boy, I sound like I'm really bragging on this one, but I guess I am. It's, when you find something you like that you can use a lot, and you want to share it with people, that's why I have this site, and this is definitely one of the better plants that I use all the time. So because it's a heavy bloomer, one of the things to remember is to feed these. If you want to get the kind of show that I've been talking about and that you're seeing, because it repeat blooms, you really need to feed this a heavy diet of fertilizer for blooming plants. And I use a rose food, or a food made for roses, or I'll use something like an Osmocote so it's slow release and I don't have to keep fertilizing over and over during the year. So using it on walls as a climber, using it on fences like you saw in one of the earlier photos, that's really a great way to use it. I've seen this on a bank before. I've never used it that way, but that's also another option. And also these bloom on new tips, so when you're deadheading it, make sure you pull those canes back quite a ways, still leaving the plant looking good, but then it's going to extend right back and grow another 2 to 4 feet when the bloom produces the bloom is produced on the end of the stem. So make sure you allow for that when you're deadheading and taking care of this plant after it's done its bloom cycle. But the quicker you get those deadheads off, the quicker it will repeat bloom for you. And as you can see, these are beautiful flowers, and this is a great one to work in. Oh, by the way, like most roses, this does want full sun, so make sure you give it plenty of sun to stimulate the best bloom possible. And that is Rose Sally Holmes. By the way, it is not drought tolerant or deer tolerant.